Kia ora tātou katoa, talawhalawa, namaste, sat sri akal, ni hao, warm Pacific greetings, malo lelei, pe tuku moa ke hu whanga he ngahi tala whakatapu, ka tā mōku ai whainga māli e koe ni. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of Manukau Technology's first TED Talks. But before I go on, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Queen Mother of Tonga, Queen Halaiwalu Mataaho, who passed away a few days ago here in Auckland. We just laid her to rest back home in Tonga a couple of days ago. The Kingdom of Tonga are still mourning, and Tongans across the world are still mourning her passing as well. The theme of today, the changing face of Manukau. I will talk about Manukau's past, the present, especially some of the issues that we're facing right now, and I'll end with our future, especially those of our young people. In terms of Manukau's past, one of the images that stayed with me as I was researching this presentation was one taken 50 years ago of a family, several families actually, that were moving in to Otara. 50 years ago, what really struck me was the mode of transportation that was used. They didn't move here using cars. They didn't move here using trucks. They moved all their things to settle in Auckland. These are Pākehā, European families, Māori and Pacific, all in this one shot. They used horses and carts to move their things. 50 years on, I don't recall ever seeing horses and carriages in the cities of South Auckland. We see so many vehicles now. There are so many more people living here out in the south. Another example to illustrate the changing face of Manukau is from Papatoetoe. When I became the Member of Parliament and I had replaced the Member of Parliament who had been there for 27 years, one of the conversations we had, I asked him to tell me what did Papatoetoe look like 27 to 30 years ago. And he said, Jenny, back then, the ethnicity or the demographic makeup of Papatoetoe people, it was 80% Pākehā, European people, and 20% ethnic minority. Today, that has totally flipped around. It is now 80% ethnic minority and around 20% Pākehā, people of European descent. You see the changing face of Manukau when you go visit schools, as I do, on a regular basis. South Auckland is a very, very diverse place, but there are some schools here where you don't even see one Pākehā or white student. You go to other parts of Auckland and it's the other way around. What's happening right now, currently? I would like to talk about two issues that I deal with as a Member of Parliament. The first is housing. Most of the people that come to ask for my help or ask for my assistance in Otara is because they no longer have a house. Many of these families have children. Many of them come in the cars and the minivans that they live in. But what I found shocking as a representative was the fact that many of them are working families. These are working families who have not lived in state houses before. These are working families who are looking for a house because the landlords of the houses that they were renting have now sold the house and they cannot find another affordable house to live in. I remember early last year doing a program with a journalist where he was really shocked when I took him out to a car park here in South Auckland where there were about 50 cars. About half of them were people who work full-time And about a quarter of those people not only work full-time, but they had degrees. I'd like to reflect now on my own past, because I represent many of the immigrants that live and have settled here in South Auckland. I was born and raised in Tonga. I was 16 years old when my parents decided that Aotearoa New Zealand is the land of opportunity. This is the place that we would realise our dreams in. And so my father, who was a pharmacist back home for 36 years, we packed up our things and we moved here with the promise of the Kiwi dream. Now that dream started out like this. We moved from house to house. We didn't have our own home for several years. And so when I sit in my office in Otara and I have families to come seeking help, let me tell you, when it's something that you have experienced yourself, it makes you humble, but it also makes you know exactly the shoes that these families are walking in. It makes you care so much more. I started out at 7th form at a school in central Auckland, and it started out reasonably well. I spoke English okay. I had learnt that in Tonga. I had done way back in the 80s. I had passed school certificate. At the time, the curriculum back home was exactly the same curriculum as over here. I had passed university entrance back home at Tonga High School. And so that piece of paper was what enabled me to attend university here. But when I entered 7th form, and this is an experience that I know a lot of students tell me they also feel, especially the ones that leave South Auckland to go and attend a school in a place outside of South Auckland, they don't feel so part of the school. They feel out of place. This is an experience I actually had, not because of a lack of English. What I felt when I first entered 7th form was kind of a culture clash. I think it's because the way that schools are back home in the islands, the culture of the school is just so different. But it is similar to some of our students here in South Auckland. The culture of the school, especially those who attend schools that is mostly Pacific and Māori students, when they enter school in another place out of South Auckland, where it's more ethnically diverse, they feel out of place. For me, I lasted about 3 months. So I did things really backwards. I left school at 7th form. My first job was as a dishwasher. I worked at a hotel in town called Hotel de Bretts, washing dishes for many weeks. What I learnt from that experience was that I didn't want to be a dishwasher for the rest of my life. So, pretty quick smart, I went and looked for my UE certificate, and I went and looked and found a job that was a little bit better. I worked in a bank for 4 years. But after working in the bank that long, and always in the back of my mind, the dream and aspirations of my parents, the reason why we had moved here, and the reason why many migrants like myself have moved to settle in South Auckland, was to realise and fulfil the potential of the dream of their parents. And so after 4 years in the bank, I took my little university entrance, and the University of Auckland accepted me as a student. I didn't grow up always wanting to study law, but I thought that it would challenge me to get in, and it was a huge challenge to get into law school. A lot of our students here in South Auckland are challenged, and they leave school without going on to further training. This is the other issue that we face in South Auckland. Too many of our young people leave school and don't continue on with their training. In fact, as of earlier on this year, 90,000 young people under the age of 24 are what we call NEET, not in education, employment or training. what is even challenging, I suppose, is here in South Auckland, the numbers of our young people aged between 15 to 19 years old. In Manukau East, 45.2% of them, according to the last census, are unemployed. The figures for Mangere and Manurewa are over 40% as well. So the challenges for our current time here at Manukau are huge. But let me tell you some of the things that we do really well. I'll give you a few examples, and I'll start from primary school. 2 years ago, one of our 2-year-old kids from Otara unfortunately passed away. Her name was Emily Taborn. After that experience, we know from the coroner's report that one of the reasons why she passed away was because the state of the house she was living in was just really unhealthy. A lot of mold, she had pneumonia, she was in and out of hospital. But the closest school to her, Rongomai Primary School, these are 8, 9 and 10-year-old kids. They, together with their science teacher, got together and they wanted to find out, why is it that some homes have mould? They also wanted to find out how many of the homes around Otara amongst their students had mould. There were 22 homes, and of those, 18 of them they found mould in. These primary school students are doing a much bigger study now of the same thing, looking at the mould issue. But this is an example of where it takes a village to raise a child. It is also an example of where the village comes together, the community comes together to find a solution for when an issue happens. Another example here in South Auckland of where things work really, really well is another school, a high school this time in Otahu. It's called Macaulay Girls High School. This high school won the top award for the Prime Minister last year of being the best school in the country. This is a school where the decile that it's given based on the socioeconomic earnings of their parents is 1B, the lowest being 1A. That aside, this school, in terms of their NCEA levels 1, 2 and 3, are in the mid to high 90s, and their university rate is over and above the national pass rate of university entrance. And so there are things that happen here in South Auckland. There are things that we do really well. There are schools here that are really excellent schools. The last illustration of this I'd like to cover is the school that we're in right now, MIT. MIT does really well in a lot of different areas. But the one thing that really strikes me is when they assist their students to get into the trades, but also when some of their students, many of you would remember just about a year ago, the strongest hurricane that hit the Pacific, Cyclone Winston, where thousands of families in Fiji lost absolutely everything. Some of the students here at MIT got on the plane, they went to Fiji and they helped to build up Fiji. In terms of our future, in terms of the jobs that we're looking at in the future, we know from research that in the next 10 to 20 years, 46% of the jobs as we know it today are no longer going to be around. So the challenge for us as community leaders, the challenge for us as parents, is how do we ensure that we address the current issues facing Manukau now, and how do we ensure that our young people are trained to be able to do the jobs of the future. What we know in the city of Auckland, in the area of construction and infrastructure alone, is that by next year, 2018, we're going to need at least 32,000 skilled people just to help build Auckland. So the challenge for us here in Manukau is how can we ensure that thousands of our young people are trained and skilled enough to be able to help out build our own here in South Auckland as well as in Auckland overall. One of the things I do when I go around the schools, primaries, especially high schools as well when I am asked to speak, is I encourage our students to learn, to love reading. One of the things I know from a lot of us Pacific Māori students that have done reasonably okay in academia is we have one thing in common. It's the love of reading. It is the one thing that me and my husband have tried to hand down to our 2 daughters, is the love of reading. If we can continue to encourage our young people at home, there are so many things we can do as parents to ensure that our kids love reading. And I would like to end with this quote. It is a quote that says, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. But if your plan is for 100 years, educate your children. That, to me, is the best thing that we could do for all of our young people here in Manukau. If we can ensure that they are able to fulfill their potential. It doesn't have to be in academia. It can be in anything that they wish to be. They can be as successful as anyone, similar to the names that Gus Gilmore, the CEO of MIT, read out before. South Auckland is full of very successful people. Tēnā koutou, tātou katoa. Kia ora.